Hey everyone! So about 2 months ago, I bought a Vizio P-Series 2018 4K. And a few weeks ago, I also bought an Xbox One X to fully utilize every pixel on my new TV. So in this video, I will be reviewing it. Before I begin with the review, I wanted to mention that I'm upgrading from an Xbox One S, which was a minor upgrade from the original Xbox. And that console served as my main console for a few years now, and I felt that it was time to upgrade. Let's discuss the design. The new Xbox One X is a smaller version of the universally praised Xbox One S design, but despite the size, the current system is actually heavier than the Xbox One S. In terms of the design, I've always believed that the original Xbox One was rather ugly, as it resembled an old VHS player. And I think Microsoft heard the complaints, hence why they designed a beautifully aesthetically pleasing Xbox One S. And the Xbox One X carries over the same elegant design in a much smaller package. The X model is a much simpler Xbox One S with far less cooling ventilation. The console can breathe on all sides apart from the front and top of the console. And I think this helps contain that simple, elegant yet minimalist design that I love. The Xbox One X has an optical media slot. However, visually, it's hard to tell, and it's rather hidden. Personally, I don't use optical media as I have two Xboxes at home and would rather buy digital games. So both Xboxes can take advantage of the games. And I think more than likely, whatever the next generation will be, it probably won't have optical media. In terms of inputs, we have the AC adapter without the power brick, thankfully, an HDMI out, HDMI in for cable purposes, two USB 3.0s, IR out, audio output, and an Ethernet connection for the most reliable connections. Around the front of the unit, we have an eject button for the optical media, IR sensor, a connect button, and finally followed by a third USB 3.0 connection. Now let's discuss the specs of the unit. The Xbox One comes equipped with an 8-core AMD processor clocked in at 2.3 GHz, paired with 12 gigs of RAM, and out of those 12, about 9 are reserved for gaming. The GPU is powered by AMD, which produces 40 compute units at roughly 6 teraflops of performance. It also comes with a 1 terabyte hard drive for storage. The optical media is a full 4K Blu-ray player. In terms of networking, the X comes with AC wireless, all powered with an internal 245 watt power supply. Now, these specs are actually pretty impressive considering the price, and they completely destroy every other console out there right now. With these specs, developers have much more freedom to create larger worlds and provide much higher details in games. Realistically, the only deficit that the Xbox One has is not having more CPU power. Maybe at some point, AMD will implement their Ryzen architecture, and that will provide some better CPU overhead for games that might actually require it. But other than that, the GPU is capable of outputting 6 teraflops of performance, which is very impressive. The Xbox One X is roughly equivalent to an RX 580 or a GTX 1060 in raw graphical performance. And those graphic cards cost roughly 50% of the total price of an Xbox One X. So keep that in mind. Surprisingly, despite the console being the most powerful gaming console currently available, it's actually very quiet. And it really shows that Microsoft is slowly improving the Xbox design with each iteration. And that's while making the overall design much smaller. Usually with more powerful hardware, you require a bigger unit for better cooling. However, Microsoft has decided to use a vapor chamber. So what exactly is a vapor chamber? A vapor chamber is not a traditional liquid cooling system, but rather a chamber that has some water in it that has been vacuum sealed. And once heat is applied, the water turns to vapor and is spread throughout the chamber, allowing heat to dissipate much more efficiently. Although this sounds rather fancy, it really isn't, and is used rather frequently in the PC world. But it is rather surprising that they decided to include this in a regular console. So is the Xbox One X water-cooled? It's not, at least not in the conventional sense, because this here is water-cooled technically, but it's just a more sophisticated version of a heatsink. But regardless of what it actually is or what it isn't, it works well on the Xbox One X, and it keeps the performance level high while decreasing noise levels. So I'm very pleased with it. Now, is the Xbox One X a true native 4K console? Well, yes and no, because not every game is running at native 4K, but it's very close. But just keep in mind that developers will have to cut some corners to get that resolution up. But more often than not, games are very close to native 4K, and for that reason alone, the console is worthy of the title of the most powerful console that you can currently buy. The biggest benefit is that you will get a very sharp image with almost no jaggy lines. Even the average Joe will be able to tell the difference. And sure, it's not an impressive graphical jump, but it's very noticeable. Graphics look far more pleasing with almost no jaggies for most games. At least they're far less noticeable. So let's take a look at some games and briefly examine them. I don't play a ton of games, but I will show you what I usually play and what each game looks like. By the way, the TV that I will be using is the Vizio P-Series 2018. For games that support the Xbox One X performance boost, be on the lookout for the enhanced logo, which means developers went back and tuned the game specifically for the Xbox One X. All the games that I will show you have been enhanced via an update. Overwatch is one of my favorite games right now, and it's probably the game that I play by far the most. And here we get a native 4K in some points of the game. However, the game engine uses a dynamic resolution that adjusts depending on what is happening on screen. So you will get a much lower resolution when a lot is happening on screen. However, I don't notice it at all. And the graphics are much improved when compared to the Xbox One S. And there is almost no jaggy edges around the characters. So this game is near native 4K. I don't play Battlefield 1 very often. However, when I do see the improvements coming from an Xbox One S. And again, this game is using a dynamic resolution. However, the console can sustain the native 4K 90% of the time. Although, if the action gets too intense, it will drop the resolution slightly, but it really isn't noticeable. Halo 5 uses a dynamic resolution and it is locked at native 4K, with virtually no dips in performance. The Xbox One X is able to flex its muscles and lock that native 4K, all while maintaining that pristine 60 FPS. Destiny 2 is also locked at native 4K. However, the game runs at only 30 FPS. Although I generally prefer 60 FPS for first-person shooters, I feel like the world and graphics sort of make up for it. Again, the game shows a massive improvement over the base Xbox One. I recently bought Red Dead Redemption 2, and the game looks so good on the Xbox One X. And surprisingly, the game runs at native 4K, and the game looks so beautiful. Everything is so sharp, and I marvel at the open world. Rockstar really knows how to make an incredible game. Do note that the game is only running at 30 FPS locked, but regardless, the game looks excellent. Out of the games that I usually play, 3 out of the 5 were native 4K, while the others were using a dynamic resolution. And they were also able to hit 4K at some points, but had to dynamically reduce the resolution to keep the performance. Although some games, it wasn't exactly pixel for pixel 4K at all times, it was rather close. And that is incredibly impressive. We went from the original Xbox One barely being able to sustain native 1080p, and now being able to run native 4K or very close to native 4K. So the graphical jump is rather big. Now, is the device worth it? I believe that the console is worth it for several reasons, and that's even if you don't own a 4K TV. And here's some of the reasons. Improvements across the board. Most games use a dynamic resolution, meaning that the native resolution will be constantly adjusted depending on what is happening on screen. If too much action is occurring, the system will lower the resolution. Such technology allows scaling, meaning a more powerful system will instantly maintain those higher resolutions, resulting in an instantly sharper image. Even at 1080p, the system will be downsampling, meaning everything will be sharp native 1080p. And even if the developer didn't provide an enhanced update, the game will have overall better frame rates. A snappier interface. The Xbox One interface feels snappier. Everything feels smoother. And all of this translates into a far better user experience. You can record at higher resolutions as well. Enhanced support is growing. Although not every game has an enhanced version, that is slowly changing as more and more games are providing 2 versions of their games. A simple, seamless update provides all of the necessary enhancements that will improve performance and the quality of the graphics. Future-proofing. By buying this console, you're future-proofing your Xbox library. I believe that consoles will see a mid-generation upgrades from here on out, where each console release improves upon the last, but allowing users to continue building up the same game library, allowing cross-compatibility. But maybe at some point, the slowest console won't be able to run a specific game, and that's when they ultimately cut it. Therefore, getting the most powerful console will allow you to keep it longer. I could be wrong about this, but I really believe that's where we're heading. And the final reason, you get a new startup screen. So that has to account for something, right? Let's discuss some of the negatives. There's only a few things that bug me. The first one, the price of $499. Although you're getting a lot of value in terms of performance, most people view consoles from a different lens than a PC, and I feel like the price should be lower for the average Joe to justify a purchase. For someone who appreciates the technology involved, they can easily justify it because they understand the components involved and how they compare to a mid-range PC. Maybe in the future, Microsoft can price the console at $399, making it an instant buy for many. Now, the second negative. Why isn't Microsoft including their rechargeable battery pack with their highest end console? Sure, regular AA batteries generally last longer, but why not include both options, especially at $499? Although these are minor nitpicks, I felt that it was important that I mention them. To conclude, the Xbox One X offers by far the best native 4K experience on a console, and the closest competitor, the PS4 Pro, doesn't really come close to the raw performance. I think that Microsoft has created an impressive console, a near true 4K console that has excellent performance. They've improved upon almost all user complaints since the original Xbox One. It's always important that a company listens to their users and what their needs are. The more they listen, the better the user experience will be. Right now, the Xbox One X is the best 4K console, and it's by far the most powerful console that money can buy. The Xbox One X is getting some price drops for the holiday season, and that only makes the console that much more appealing. I love the console, and I wish I would have bought it day one rather than waiting until now. On a side note, I always play online, and I'm always connected via an Ethernet, and for that I use the TP-Link AV1000 power line. And no, they're not a sponsor, I just really like how this works and how reliable it is. So check it out, I will link it down below. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button. And as always, I'll catch you guys next time.